Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. So it's been about 2 years since I listened to an audiobook for the first time, and the book that I listened to was Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and I listened to this as a reading challenge prompt to read an audiobook, which I had never done before. I ended up loving it and the audiobook experience and gave the book 5 stars, and that started my journey with audiobooks, and it has allowed me to read even more books just in general. I had limited space for books in the house that I was living in at the time, but I have since moved and now have an entire room full of shelves dedicated to my love of books and reading, and it just makes me so happy to just like stand in this room and be surrounded by books, and it means that I have room for more books even than before. So I have started keeping an eye out for used books at thrift stores and places like Penguin books and books like on sale that are physical copies of audiobooks that I've listened to and enjoyed enough to want to spend money on them twice. I couldn't really justify that to myself in my old house, but I have the space to do that now, so I wanted to go through the books that I first listened to as audiobooks and enjoyed so much that I deemed them worth owning physically to display on my shelves. So all of these I have given either 4 or 5 stars in the past, so I guess this is kind of a little run through of some of my favorite books that I've read recently, at least on audiobooks. So I'll go ahead and get started. So I will start with Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and I'll also include Bloodmarked in this, which is book 2 in the series, narrated by Jonice Abbott Pratt, and this is a contemporary fantasy about a girl named Brianna Matthews who joins this magical secret society called the Order of the Round Table in hopes of learning how it might be connected to the death of her mom, and members of the order are called Legendborn, and they protect humanity by fighting against shadowborn demons. Both books are pretty fast-paced and full of amazing world building, really cool battles, some great characters, fun characters, black girl magic. It's fun, but it also addresses grieving, institutional racism, and the importance of family and ancestors. There's a love triangle if you're into that. It's just so good, really enjoyable. I want everyone to read this series. I love it. And Jonice Abbott Pratt is a great narrator as well, so the audiobook and the physical book, I actually haven't read them physically yet, but the audiobooks were fantastic. I guess most of these, all of these, I haven't actually read physically yet. I've only listened to these as audiobooks. Circe by Madeline Miller, narrated by Perdita Weeks. This is a retelling of the story of Circe, who is the Greek goddess of witchcraft and sorcery, and she's the daughter of Helios, god of the sun, and this is the story of her growing up and eventually being banished by Zeus to the remote island of Aiaia, where she hones her craft and encounters various figures of Greek legend. And this started out a little bit on the slow, meandering side for me, but after it reached a certain point, it just really had me hooked, and I just love mythology in general, but I didn't know really anything about Circe before this, and at least the way she's portrayed here, she's a fantastic and strong character, and even though I didn't personally relate to the parts about motherhood, I enjoyed reading about her love and her fears and what she would do for her son, and this was just beautifully written, and in my opinion, it is superior to the Song of Achilles. Strange the Dreamer and the second book of the duology, Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor and narrated by Steve West. This is a fantasy about this humble librarian named Laszlo Strange who is obsessed with this mythical city called Weep, and he's convinced it's real, and he gets the chance of a lifetime to actually visit this secret city and help its people with a very daunting and impossible problem. And you also follow this group of blue-skinned people who have these powers and are trapped in a way. And everything is eventually tied together, and this series had beautiful prose, very human characters, and book one has a particularly emotional and intense ending. There is a slow burn romance that it's also kind of insta-love in a way, but it's a really sweet, you know, soulmate, destined to be kind of love. And I think that the first book is the best, but I enjoyed both of these a lot. You get more world building and other backstory in the second book. It's about just being kind, about trauma and empathy and the power of stories. And I love this. This is a special Owl Crate edition of the duology with these blue sprayed edges. It's just gorgeous. Dry by Neal and Jarrod Shusterman. And there are like 5 narrators in this one, so I'll put their names on the screen. This is a contemporary fiction that takes place in California during a very bad drought, and one day the taps just stop giving water. And there are multiple POVs that you're following, and this book is people trying to survive in this situation and not die of dehydration. It was a very fast descent into anarchy. This was very disturbing, but really well done, even though to me the main character was kind of frustrating at times. This book did make me anxious. I live in a very arid climate, and this book legitimately made me stop buying almond milk. I think this book is a warning and a wake-up call, but it was a page turner. I mean, it would have been if I had read it physically, and it was just very impactful for me in my real life. I recommend it highly, as long as the idea of it doesn't just immediately give you like stomach curdling anxiety, because it will only make it worse. But it was a really good book. I do recommend it. Spin by Robert Charles Wilson, narrated by Scott Brick, and I'll also include the second book of the trilogy, Axis. This is science fiction, and you're following what happens when all of the sudden, out of nowhere, this shell encases the entire Earth. And we find out that somehow time inside the shell on Earth is moving much slower than time outside. Like so much so that the sun is in fairly imminent danger of destroying the planet. So you follow the POV of the main character, Tyler, and a couple other people as scientists try to figure out a way to save humanity. And the first book was, to me, surprisingly intriguing, because this is a very slow burn, very character driven, and slice of life living in the new reality of living inside this shell, which are all things that I don't usually gravitate towards. Very sciencey and technical at times, and really interesting and compelling. And book 2 is faster paced, much faster paced, more plot driven, and has much more of an alien presence compared to book 1, and I really liked it. I liked both. Book 3 wasn't nearly as good as the first 2, unfortunately, but I do still recommend the series if you're into kind of a little bit harder sci-fi. Well, harder as in not super action-packed. It's focused on the science and is really, you know, based in reality. Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, narrated by Emily Ellett. This is a fantasy about this girl named Elizabeth who was raised to believe that magic-wielding sorcerers are bad. And her dream is to become a warden to protect the tools of the sorcerer's trade, which are grimoires that can come to life. And grimoires are kept in these great libraries, and she lives in a great library. And she's framed for a crime that she didn't commit and has to work with a sorcerer named Nathaniel to uncover this magical conspiracy that has wide-reaching implications. And this one grew on me. I didn't love the audiobook narration, but I liked lots of other things about it. Like, I did like how the chosen one trope was done in this book, and Elizabeth, the main character, grows a lot throughout the book, and I did enjoy her romance with Nathaniel, and there's a really cool demonic side character named Silas who is really cool. The magic system is more soft than I usually like, but it didn't bother me in this case. The ending was very exciting, and this was just overall very fun and entertaining and an easy read. And you know, the heroine is a bookworm, so that's cool. The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward, narrated by Christopher Ragland. This is a horror thriller about this man named Ted, who lives in a boarded up house with his daughter and his cat. He is a recluse and is clearly not mentally well, and one day a new neighbor moves in next door and starts to take an interest in him and his home, and not, seemingly not for innocent neighborly reasons, and there are some dark secrets being kept. This was very disturbing and intense and even sad at times, and this is one of the only books I've ever read where I immediately wanted to reread it after I finished it. This was confusing at times, but everything becomes clear at the end, and this definitely won't be for everyone. I don't think that this book has the highest Goodreads rating. Maybe check out trigger warnings if you need to, and this is one of those where I hate to say I enjoyed this because it was very dark, but this was a captivating and harrowing book that made me want to read everything that the author has ever written to see how it compares. This one has stuck with me, so it's really good. I'm glad that I own this one. This is actually one of the first audiobooks that, one of the first physical copies of an audiobook that I had listened to already that I bought. The Wells of Sorcery trilogy by Django Wexler, narrated by Catherine Ho. The first book is Ship of Smoke and Steel, and this is a fantasy series, and the series name refers to the magic system. There are several different wells of sorcery that mage bloods are able to dip into that give them abilities and powers like enhanced speed or being able to expel fire, and you're following the main character Isoka, who is captured by the Emperor's spy master for her ability to access the Well of Combat. And she is ordered to commandeer and steal this ginormous legendary ghost ship called Soliton, or else her younger sister will be killed. This whole series was action-packed with really great fight scenes, and the setting of Soliton was really ominous and cool, and the other books take place at other locations as well, but I really enjoyed the entire series. It was just a fun time. Nothing super complicated or deep, honestly. The magic system wasn't revolutionary, but it was still cool, and it just felt very comfortable to me as a fantasy fan. I enjoyed the characters for what they were, and I just think back on this series frequently and fondly. I really enjoyed it. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, narrated by Ray Porter. This is a sci-fi about this man named Ryland Grace, who wakes up in a spaceship with no memory of how he got there, but his memory slowly starts to return, and he realizes that he is Earth's last chance at survival, but he isn't even sure if he's capable of saving it or how he's supposed to do it. And I didn't expect this to be as funny as it was. Even though the situation is very dire, Ryland is a likable, funny, sometimes corny main character, and Ray Porter is a fantastic narrator. The audiobook is really good. This has a lot of math and science heavy sections. This is like a book of well-explained science experiments, but they're written in a way that the average person can still follow and understand, and still get invested. It was really interesting, and the split timeline narrative is worked into the plot really well, and this had several emotional, high intensity moments, thrilling moments, and I finished reading this book with a big smile on my face. Oh, and also Rocky. Rocky's the best. We stan Rocky. Dark Rise by C.S. Pacat, narrated by Christian Coulson. This is a fantasy that takes place in an alternate London in the 1800s, and that's one of my favorite settings, honestly. And the main character, Will, is on the run from the people who killed his mom, and he is pulled into the world of this secret group called the Stewards, whose mission is to protect humanity from the Dark King, who was defeated in the past but is now on the rise. There is magic, a gritty and dark setting, shifting, uncertain loyalties, really good world building, and a crazy twist ending that has me stoked to see how things play out in the second book, which is coming out this year, very soon actually. And it does have some slow moments, but I really liked the characters and being in the world, so I really didn't mind those moments. This just ticked a lot of boxes for me in fantasy. Really enjoyed it. The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones, narrated by Moira Quirk. This is a fantasy about a gravedigger named Rin who lives in a remote village with her family where these creatures called bone houses sometimes attack people. And they are corpses and skeletons animated by magic. And Rin goes on this journey into the mountains with this apprentice map maker named Ellis to try and break this curse that is causing more and more bone houses to appear and attack. And this takes place in the same world as her book The Drowned Woods, which I actually read first because it came in an Owl Crate box, and I enjoyed this one even more, even though I did enjoy The Drowned Woods. I like the simple writing style. There is a goat animal companion who is fantastic. There are some mysteries to solve regarding the two main characters. I enjoyed the very light romance between them, and Ellis has chronic pain, which I felt was incorporated very well and just naturally into the story. Plenty of action and adventuring. This was a quick read, an easy read. I definitely hope that the author writes more in this world because I really like it. And the last book I'm going to talk about, and the one that I read most recently, is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, narrated by Grace Gummer. This is a contemporary fiction about a girl named Vanessa who was sexually abused by her teacher starting when she was 15 years old. It went on for years and shaped her life all the way to the present day when she's in her 30s. But Vanessa doesn't want to accept that what she went through was abuse and wants to believe that it was real love and that it was her choice. It's a split timeline following younger Vanessa as she is being abused and manipulated, and then current day Vanessa when sexual assault allegations are being put forth about her teacher by other former students of his. This was an incredible book, at times a difficult read, at times very sad, frustrating, disgusting, and explicit, but it was so well written and captivating. Highly recommend if the topic isn't triggering for you. Just definitely one of the objectively best books I've read this year. And those are, so far, some of the best books I've read via audiobook, essentially. Again, most of these were bought secondhand, either by finding them in thrift stores or in a few cases when I bought them directly from other readers used on Pango Books. The special edition of The Strange the Dreamer duology I got new from Owl Crate during a special collab with the author. And actually the same goes for my edition of Bloodmarked. That was also a special Owl Crate edition. A couple of these I did get new in the buy one get one half off sale at Barnes & Noble, but they're all books that I really enjoyed enough to want to have them represented in my physical collection as well, in my library. So I hope that you enjoyed this and maybe got a few book recs. All of these, again, I gave either 4 or 5 stars, so I like them all. I endorse them all. They all get a thumbs up. So let me know if you've read any of these and if you read them physically or on audiobook. At this point, I absolutely believe that the format of a book can change your thoughts about it. So I'm curious what your experience with these books have been if you've read them. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!